And so I just caution members of the council that at some point I'm going to have to be a little more stringent on what we throw in front of everybody in the morning. Are we ready to?
We are now ready.
Okay. Well, should we call it order? Why not? Okay. What have we got on the agenda?
We have three on-table items. The first is item 7.1, a submission from Councillor Fast regarding glass sponge
I only have
reef
two.
protection.
I don't have a two.
It's under here.
Oh, it's under the,
No problem at all. And we have item 9.1 A and B, which is in addition to Councillor Mickelson's Metro Vancouver business update.
Okay. And what is, oh, that's public hearing. Gotcha. That's why I've got the, fair enough.
can I do a minor amendment? Can I ask for a minor amendment at this moment?
To what?
The agenda.
What are you thinking?
I would like a minor amendment to item 9.5. I just wanted to add, it's like discussing about the express bus, and I also wanted
So you're about the what?
the express bus.
Okay.
I also wanted to talk about parking in the code during the MLU.
And parking in code?
Okay, 9.5. Sure. Go parking. Okay, we can add that.
It's all part of 9.5?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
We could just maybe call it
It's to do with.
ferry upgrade,
Sure.
refit.
Okay, the sponge reef thing, is that something that we are talking about today?
Yes, that's at 7.1. It's just the communication thing. This is what came from the Ocean Watch Task Force to the last Howe Sound Forum. And we passed the one about the Ocean Watch Marine Guide funding, but we didn't deal with this one. So I put this one on.
So this is a late item?
On 7.1.
Yeah, it's an on-table item, and the proposed resolutions are the same ones as were in the, agreed upon by everybody at the Howe Sound Forum. So that's all it is.
Is it time sensitive?
Okay. So, have we sorted out the agenda, folks? Motion to approve?
As amended?
Okay. Seconded, all in favor, passed unanimously. And so, public comments time.
First up, we have Doug Ray speaking on Hood Point speed humps. Doug here? No, he had sent his request in by email. We'll move along to Trish Treasure.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Never done this before, so I don't know what I'm doing. My name is Trista Cat. I am the third owner of the 1153 Ecozone adjacent to the 1160 Ecozone, and I'm representing my mom and my brother. At last council meeting, a member asked Emma Chow about the feasibility of the road access. She actually hesitated before giving an answer. That to me raises a red flag. In this fact, the location is not feasible at all. The document between Bonnie and the municipality says nothing about taking responsibility for creating a parking facility and maintaining it. This document is not for the benefit of the neighboring properties and is unacceptable. In the next breath, Emma stated that at this point in time, there is no action to develop the road access. I am sure that is because the cost involved will be thousands to create parking in the trail, never mind the ongoing cost of maintenance. Then what is the point of taking beat access as an exchange? Greed, Parks and Trails document, just so the applicant can get a building permit? If this issue affected only the applicant, that is one thing, but it doesn't. It affects the neighboring properties. I also believe council can find better ways of spending money. Public boat launch, creating more public parking in the cove, than trying to create a steep slope for public access and changing the status of the private beach access. In fact, in 1983, the beach access was agreed upon by two property owners and registered in land title. As this is a legal document, wouldn't the two parties have to agree to cancel the original document and create a new document with all new parties involved? This particular parcel of land is connected as one long open pathway between the two properties. Like all setbacks for buildings, is there any required setbacks for public beach access in regards to easements on private property? As for desirability, I can name 14 public beaches on Bowen that are considerably far more desirable with easier access than this small rocky bay. It's not even wide enough to be considered a beach. How many waterfront properties are attached to public easement? Maintaining its public beauty and the ecosystem have not been disturbed by the public, and we wish to remain. Over the years, there have been many owners of the 1160 Ecclestone. Every one of those owners has respected and enjoyed the privacy of the beach access. Now that some of you had a chance to view the site, I'm hoping you understand my point of view. There are still many questions to be answered. I ask council to rethink or even disregard this particular application and look for a better solution. Best solution would be to leave the beach access as private. There's really no benefit to the municipality, and it would be in the best interest for all parties. My mom also makes a note that she is not interested in having it changed from private to public. It would also change the status of the property right now, waterfront with private access, to just waterfront property. And as a last note, has council ever considered selling off the road allowance? Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one question, if I may ask.
Yep.
The document that you have there,
Yep.
I'd just be curious to know whether you could let Emma and or Daniel have a copy of it. I'm not saying they don't have it, I just don't know that they do. So I would appreciate if they could have a copy of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Pitch Keating.
Morning, Mayor and councilors. I want to thank Mayor and council members who attended a site visit at our house last Wednesday. And I now hope I can chart out a route that will be satisfactory to both council and us regarding how to acquire beach access and proceed with our variance. At the moment, planning staff is tying the covenant for the beach access to our application for the variance permit. At the November 14th council meeting, council was told by planning that the applicant would like to offer land, beach in exchange for land under the encroachments, but stated, however, the Land Titles Act, under the Land Titles Act, a minimum width of 20 meters must be paid for the right-of-way. This means the land under the encroachments can't be disposed of unless an equal amount of land were granted to keep it 20 meters. Due to this requirement, the land exchange in that report, they felt it couldn't be legalized. I forwarded a letter to council requesting council ask on the November the 22nd, requesting council to ask a municipal lawyer whether Bowen Council in fact has, under the community charter, the right to dispose of highway or part versus the highway 20 meters wide requirement under the Land Titles Act. And I would like to have your support for forwarding to the municipal lawyer for an updated opinion on this. I think in the past, the 20-meter limit requirement did not in the reviews that done at that time, did not reference the community charter. And the community charter has provisions in it that allow a swap, a trade, in land that ends at the sea for something that offers better access. So a part of the land that's within that last part of the road could be swapped under the charter. And the question I would like council to resolve by going to the municipal lawyer is, does council have the power to do this under the community charter, is the essence of it. And then I'm also hoping to separate the variance process from the encroachment process and the beach process. I think council has previously granted variances like the one we are requesting without requiring amenities like a beach. During the discussion with Emma today regarding the draft breach agreement, I'm hoping for clarification on Kathy LeBlanc's comments at the last council meeting that the municipality cannot preclude issuing a variance despite having encroachments on the property. And during that discussion, I hope council can determine that the variance process can proceed separately from dealing with the encroachment and the beach access. And so we want to do this. We want to make the exchange. And I think that, you know, it's in concert with the community plan for more beaches. And we're willing to, once we get an agreement about what the encroachment definitions are, what the beach title agreement is, to if necessary, have our lawyer at Ratcliffe hold that in trust until the rest of the agreement points can be determined and so that the agreement can go through. So short story is I'm hoping that the kind of variance that we're asking for, which is under an existing roof line and in line with a deck that's already there in terms of sea setbacks, that can proceed in the way that many requests have been approved, I think, by this council for slight variances about setbacks. And so that can proceed separately and then get confidence that we can come to an agreement to give beach access in exchange for the resolving the encroachments permanently.
Okay, thanks.
And last Wednesday, I sent out a draft a motion.
Yes.
And then I just revised a few words in here for, if such a motion is going to get made today, a few words that might improve it, if I could pass that out.
It's okay. We don't, you leave it with Tyler. We won't be dealing with it today. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all we have for public comments today.
Okay, full consent agenda. How are we doing on it today?
Well, I left my notes at home as to where I want to pull, so.
Good.
No, I just will pull everything then, so you don't want to do that.
Sue Ellen?
I'd like to pull 311,
Okay,
it's the work plan.
311, recreation and investigate feasibility of disco. Okay, we'll throw that in.
Could I,
Just one second. 311 disco, items removed
It's-
under
yeah.
item 10.
It's the work plan is actually the second recommendation that I'm
Oh, okay.
interested in.
Okay, sorry, Michael.
3.4.
2.4 we have. Okay. 3.4. And yes, Allison.
I just one technical question, I forgot to send Tyler my changes to the minutes. If we need to amend the minutes because I wasn't there for part of the meeting and it's not recorded in the minutes, do we need to pull for that, or can we just do that as a typo change?
Which minutes?
The last council meeting.
This is okay, we'll defer
We can
approval
certainly
of
defer it.
the, yeah, defer approval of the minutes
Okay.
until the next meeting.
So I need to pull those so we can defer. And 3.2. And 3.8.
Sorry, ratification, now, what's this, a typo again? Or
No,
what's-
no.
3.2, okay, if you want to
3.4.
discuss that.
Mine was pulled. 3.8. That was it, I think.
3.8 is,
is the variance, Fitch's variance.
3.8 is the reports of committees.
Okay.
Well, 3.8 on my agenda.
Yeah, we have a number
It's
issue.
page 86 to 93, Emmett Chow Island Community Plan and Redevelopment Variance Permit. Oh, we've, Parks and Trails is also numbered 3.8.
Yep, sorry, that was missed.
Okay. Well, we'll call
yeah,
that
fair enough.
So please
2.8B,
clarify, which item are you pulling, Allison?
the DBP, the first date, 3.8, page 86 to 93.
Yes.
Okay. Okey doke, anything else? Okay, motion to approve consent agenda, we did. All in favor? Passed. So, delegations. Do we have Kate?
Morning, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
My name is Kate Eddings, and I work with the Islands Trust, with the Islands Trust Fund, actually.
Yeah, have a seat.
Thank you. I'm here just to refer two documents to Council from the Islands Trust Fund. The first is the 5-year plan of the Islands Trust Fund, and the second is the Regional Conservation Plan. And I was going to ask Mr. Mayor how you would like to deal with those, if you want to deal with them separately, or if you'd like me to speak to them together.
This is your time. You just do it in whichever way you like.
Okay, well, it helps to talk a little bit about the two, but I'll focus first on the 5-year plan. So the Islands Trust Fund is required under the Islands Trust Act to create a 5-year plan that we refer to the minister. And that plan has to have certain things under statute, so that the act actually tells us what we need to put in there, and then the minister has to approve that in order for us to continue doing our business. So what we have before you today is actually a request for decision. We've suggested that you receive it as a draft, but of course you can provide comment or and make motions as you see fit. Basically, the actual 5-year plan itself goes into how we acquire land, how we dispose of land, our mission, vision, and how we go about doing our business. It goes through the policies that we have in place currently, and then also refers to our regional conservation plan, which is the second item I'm going to talk about today. Perhaps most of it really is how we do business currently, and it's a way of formalizing that. The only thing that I'll just mention is that we have put in a request to the minister for a name change, which has been something that we've had on our to-do list, or which has been in motion for a number of years. We have this tendency to be seen as a group that has a lot of money because we have fund at the end of our name, Islands Trust Fund. So we have a request to the minister to change our name to the Islands Trust Conservancy, which reflects a little more what we do, which is largely nature reserve acquisition, conservation covenant management, and then a lot of planning related to that, planning and mapping. So I think that's all I'll say about that particular document. I don't know if there are any questions about that one in particular.
I had a question. You said that there were some recommendations. We don't have a recommendation on our agenda.
So you should have been provided with along with these two documents, the first is like a request for decision, or what we call a request for decision. And then with the Regional Conservation Plan, we've provided a briefing note.
There's in our agenda package on the.
Oh, that must be 231? Okay, it's just not in our.
Yeah, page 124 has a referral of the draft conservation plan.
Yeah,
And
and
conversation.
we've suggested it, and this is what we've done with all of the local trust committees, because it's a formal requirement under our own policy that we refer these documents out. We just want something in your minutes to say that you have received the document.
Okay.
Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
to.
I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
No, what's the timeline on the referral?
We are hoping to have the trust fund board approve the document at the end of January 30th, so you could have.
So you don't need comments today?
I don't need
You've
comments
got
today.
sort of
I
30
would
days.
I think you have council meetings every 2 weeks, is
We
that
got one
correct?
in December the 11th, and then not again until June.
Because I'm prepping the plans to go to, okay, actually I should back up. The Islands Trust Fund 5-year plan is actually going to the end of the year, So we would love to have comments back on that particular one today. or very soon. The other one is not until January, which I can talk about in a minute, isn't until January 30th, so you have a little more time for that. And that has more of the details of the work that we do.
Okay, so all you would want from us then is a motion to receive the draft Islands Trust Fund Regional Conservation Plan.
No, the Islands Trust Fund 5-year plan, and I realize it's confusing.
There's two. The legislation requires a 5-year plan. And the legislation would require that because in essence, the trust fund holds all the properties and covenants that it holds in trust for the province.
Right. Okay. Okay, so I just got my two documents backwards.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Carry on.
Okay, so I'll leave that for the moment. Now, as mentioned, and just to clarify the difference between the two, the 5-year plan is that legislatively required thing with a bunch of tick boxes that we have to tick under the legislation. We do a far more detailed planning process for the work that we actually undertake, and that is called our Regional Conservation Plan. In the past, we have done 5-year regional conservation plans. So this year, we've moved to a 10-year planning cycle. And the reason for doing that is to try to have a little bit more time to actually get the work done, rather than kind of moving through a planning process every 5 years. To integrate some flexibility into how we do that work, what we've decided to do is create 3-year work plans so that we can adapt and change some of the actual day-to-day activities as need arises. So just to kind of go through, I've provided a briefing note that sort of talks about why we do the plan and you know, when it begins and how it gets carried out. But I thought I would just take a couple of minutes to highlight some of the sections that I think are interesting, and then I will certainly take questions. The other thing I wanted to mention is both this plan and our other 5-year plan, which is very confusing, I recognize, have been referred out to all the First Nations in the Islands Trust area for comment. They're also being referred to all the local trust committees on the other islands as well as to Bowen Island Municipality. They've been sent to our partners, so parks agencies and then island conservancies, and they're also available for public comment on our website if anyone's interested in looking at those. The Regional Conservation Plan itself is actually divided into 3 parts. There's sort of a context for working in our region, the current landscape, which looks at what we have available currently on the landscape, and then we have the actual core of the plan, which is looking at the next 10 years. New in this plan, as opposed to what we had in our last plan, we have some additions to our mapping products, which have fed into some of the goals and objectives that we have. We've added to our shoreline mapping, so we have eelgrass mapping now and forage fish mapping for some areas, including Bowen. We've updated our terrestrial ecosystem mapping this year, so that product just came in August, and that is what we use to update things like sensitive ecosystem mapping in the region too. So that's available to Bowen, and we did use it for the our planning purposes for Bowen. We've done building footprint mapping, which sort of seems a strange thing for a conservation organization to do, but it helps us to look at the landscape and where development is occurring and where it is present, and use that to kind of think about where the more natural areas of the landscape are. So that has been done and includes Bowen and is available to the Bowen Island Municipality as well. An interesting little thing, when we did our ecosystem mapping, the mappers offered to do a disturbance mapping, so we took them up on that offer, and it basically looked at the change, the disturbed landscape between 2004 and 2014, and mapped that across the Islands Trust region, and I'll talk a little bit more about Bowen in particular in a few moments. We've also got critical habitat data, which is new for the Islands Trust area and actually for Canada as a whole. So for those of you who follow the Species at Risk Act, there are, in the requirements for the federal government to maintain species viability, they are required to identify critical habitat for species at risk, particularly endangered and threatened species. And they have just over the last couple of years started to do that for a number of species. And so in the Islands Trust region, there are over 80 species that fall under endangered or threatened listings. And we've seen a handful of those where they've identified habitat. And I mention this because it's an area that I'm anticipating is going to grow for our region because they are required to identify this critical habitat, and we've only had a few species where that's happened. So for Bowen, and I will mention this when I talk a little bit more about Bowen, there is some critical habitat identified here, and it's both on federal lands and there are some private lands identified, so just mention that. So that's sort of an overview of the plan. One thing for islands to know is that this is a regional plan for us, so we aren't looking at islands as a core and just kind of looking at prioritizing within islands for our own purposes. We look at the region as a whole. So, for example, if Bowen Island has a small amount of eelgrass habitat that is unprotected, for example, and we see a lot more available in another area of our Islands Plus region, we may be focusing more on that other area of the region. But that's not to say that what you have here isn't important and isn't worthy of local protection or local focus. It's just that we are a regional organization, so we're looking at it on that level. So I'll just flag that, because you'll notice there are areas in the plan where we talk about focusing on islands, and that's really because we have limited resources and we need to allocate them appropriately. So the other thing to note is that we have, to help islands that are doing local conservation work, we've created island profiles at the end of the document, and so there is one for Bowen. That starts on page
We're talking
30.
about 10-year plan.
This is the 10-year plan. And it just kind of goes into some statistical details for the island, which I hope will
What was
help
the page
you.
number? Sorry, I missed that.
Page 30 of the Regional
Of the
Conservation
plan,
Plan. Yeah. And it kind of, like I said, it's a profile of the island. It tells you that you've got 14%, just over 14% in protected area. Over 54% of your island is considered sensitive ecosystem. Now, most of that is forested, so mature forest, almost 50%. Which is actually a highlight that Bowen has. You have really wonderfully aged forest over here compared with other islands that we have in our region. So congratulations on maintaining some of those. As I mentioned, there are the species at risk. Critical habitat mapping has been done, and I've actually put a snapshot of that and where it's located in the plan, but we actually have that as a data layer as well. I mentioned earlier about forested ecosystems. You do have a large amount of forest area on the island, over 4,000 hectares. Not all in mature forest, but more than half is in mature forest class or older.
Can you add a little bit of comment about the coastal Douglas fir while you're
Yeah.
talking about the forest? Because I'm back at the big map before I got to page 36 of your report, or page 30, on page 28. There's a coastal Douglas fir and associated ecosystems map. And coastal Douglas fir is a dark green, and I don't see any dark green on Bowen.
Okay, so I actually sit on a steering committee for the Coastal Douglas
Yeah.
Fir and Associated Ecosystems Conservation Partnership, which is a bit of a mouthful.
And that's the map I'm looking at.
Yeah, so, and that's on page 28.
Sorry.
There is, when you look at, the reason that they decided to make a very long name out of it,
Sorry, page 28 of which plan?
of the Regional Conservation
Thank you.
Plan. And the reason that so the dark green area in that map is what they call the Coastal Douglas Fir Biogeoclimatic Zone. It has many, many rare species and rare ecosystem types. The area that the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership works on is larger than that, because coastal Douglas fir ecosystems don't only occur in the Coastal Douglas Fir zone. They also occur as, and they're called Coastal Western Hemlock XM1 in the larger area that's identified here. And that's
Those
just-
are the associated ecosystems,
That's right. Yeah, so, and they have, because they have a lot of the same species assemblages that the Coastal Douglas Fir Zone has, like the Douglas fir, the arbutus, those kinds of species that you see together in sort of the drier, more, the drier, less, I won't say less rich, because sometimes that's not true, but the drier areas of the region. they have been grouped in with this. And so they are important, but they're not considered part of the Coastal Douglas Fir biogeoclimatic zone.
So
Does
I
that
guess,
help?
yeah, so I guess my question is related to, province had just done a map or an order in council to put some coastal Douglas fir areas, Salt Spring was one of them and a couple others in Vancouver Island, into a more of a protected status. And because we've had this issue with logging on Crown land, I was thinking if, because our area is in the partnership map, that we would be able to use having the Douglas fir present in our Crown lands as a protection mechanism. But because we don't have any of the dark green, don't know if that then wipes out that idea.
So Islands Trust is looking at providing feedback on that land use order.
Yeah.
So, and feedback for that is open until January 15th. And one of the things we're considering as part of our feedback is just highlighting to the province that the CWH XM1 also contains similar ecosystems to those that they are trying to protect in the coastal Douglas fir zone, with the hope, I understand that they can amend the land use order as they go forward. In fact, that's what they're putting
So they
forward
might,
right now.
you're trying to get them to add the associated ecosystems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is only in Crown land for them. This is something that, a way that they set aside some of their Crown land for protection. So, yeah, I think we're looking at doing that at the Islands Trust level. If the feedback is open, so if the municipality wanted to provide similar feedback.
Well, if part of the process that the Islands Trust is going through is to ask the various different forest areas to assess their lands and look at them as to what's there, then we're not in the same forest area as Gambier. So you need to cover the three that sort of cover the Vancouver Island forest area, the one that covers the Sunshine Coast, and the one that covers us, which is part of the Lower Mainland Sea to Sky.
Yeah, and that's something that we're looking at as well, because like you said, the regions are different, and all the lands that they've included in the land use order are in a particular region.
Well, they're in the particular Vancouver Island, but if you're asking them to expand the program to the other regions that the Island Trust Islands are in, or forest areas, then you've got to cover off three of them, not just, or two more, not just one more.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on that? I'm almost done. I did want to highlight that the plan also identifies modified ecosystems, so ecosystems that are no longer considered natural. And we, for Bowen, have found that there's about 14% that has been what we call converted. Most of that for your region is in rural development and road development, so just something to flag. And in that disturbance mapping that we did, which looks at basically a snapshot of change between 2004 and 2014, Bowen Island was found to have lost about 113 hectares of land. And most of that, again, which you probably know because you know your island, was largely from rural development and associated roads. And then the only other thing to say is that we do highlight conservation groups that we know are working in the area, and I've put those at the end of your island profile. If you know of additional groups that we should be aware of, please do let us know. And island ones that I've mentioned are the Bowen Island Conservancy, the Bowen Island Fish and Wildlife Club, and then the other ones are more regional in nature. So any questions on the 10-year plan? So that one I just provided as a briefing, so I don't need any resolution from you, but if you have any feedback or if anyone wants to catch me on a typo, feel free to send an email.
Sorry, did you want to go back to the other plan, or you?
I guess, yes, we do need to, we did have a request for a resolution for the.
Right, so do you have one?
Well, I've sketched something out. We didn't have a draft resolution on our agenda sheet, so I'm kind of pulling this out. I'm wondering if I move that council approve in principle the 5-year plan as presented by the Islands Trust. And That's it,
November 27th council meeting.
at the November 27th council meeting.
Okay, so,
Or we could just say approve it,
I think we,
or we could refer it to
our
staff.
motion to receive, isn't that what we've been receiving? Motion to receive the
Well, I
draft
think what-
Islands Trust 5-year plan.
I think what I heard from Kate is that she wants, by the end of December, she's got to have it into the ministry.
Well, so the actual suggested motion was a motion to receive, and the
Oh.
reason that that is the case is because the plan is actually not an Islands Trust Council plan.
That's
it's
fine,
a
I'm
trust
just,
fund
I
board
still
plan.
haven't found this
Yeah.
draft motion.
So it
So
should have been at the
receive
very
is fine.
beginning.
Okay,
Yeah.
that council receive the Islands Trust Fund 5-year plan as presented by Islands Trust Fund staff at the November 27th, 2017 meeting. I'll second that.
No, sure.
can I just ask
Discussion.
one question? Are there anything specific in the plan that's specific to Bowen?
We list the properties that we hold on the island.
But that's just a
Um,
fact.
Yeah,
There's
no,
no-
it's not really, none of it is specific to each individual island. There are some references to islands where we have conservation funds available. Bowen, we don't actually have a fund. Those largely come through donations,
Yeah.
requests, and things like that.
That's where you're actively trying to acquire something.
Yeah, that's what we use.
Okay, so put it to a vote, all in favor? Passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. And then, good reading.
Thank you.
Lots of good reading there.
Okay, I
Yes.
ask you questions then, make sure you read it.
Okay, so next up, where are we here? Business arising, Emma.
Nothing. It's staff report.
Oh, we're on to staff reports. Okay.
Okay, we haven't done this before.
Good morning,
Mayor and Council.
Emma.
Have a new variance application for introduction. This is for 815 Smith Road. It's in the Mount Gardner neighborhood of